Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're opening up a really fascinating window into how people look for connection.
That's right. Our deep dive today gives us, a real close-up look at two people meeting basically for the first time in a very public way.
And they're openly talking about their lives, their pasts, their hopes for a partner.
Exactly.
So our mission here is to really unpack what they shared. We'll look at how they describe themselves, their experiences, and try to get a sense of, well, not just what they said, but maybe the subtle things, the dynamics, perhaps even some contradiction that could hint at why a connection worked or didn't.
Right. And we're focusing on one specific potential match from this particular episode.
So let's set the scene.
So we've got Nguyen Vanek. He's 28, lives in Ho Chi Minh City, and works in customer care. And the potential match is Tan Thi Hoai Anh. She's 27, she's based in Hanoi, and she works in import-export. She kind of described it simply as online sales.
Right. So immediately, that geographical distance jumps out. HCMC and Hanoi. That's quite a ways apart.
It really is a significant distance. That's a factor right from the start.
Definitely. So, okay, let's start with the basics, how they introduce themselves. You said Tut, 28, HCMC District 12 specifically, and restaurant customer care.
Yep. And Hoai Anh, 27, up in Hanoi, doing import-export or online sales. That distance, like you said, it's the immediate challenge you notice.
So let's dig into how they describe themselves, their personalities, their work styles. What came up there?
Well, and he mentioned his pros were being diligent, hardworking, but then when asked about cons, he admitted he's a workaholic. The phrase he used was ham kom tik viek.
Oh, right. What does that translate to, roughly?
It's something like being greedy for work and begrudging rest. Very telling. He also said he likes things to be a bit more perfect.
Okay, so a dedicated worker maybe leans towards perfectionism. What about Hoai?
Hoai Anh listed her pros as being caring, sharing, and financially independent. But her cons were pretty direct. Yeah, she just came out and said she doesn't know how to cook and isn't good at housework. And interestingly, she linked this directly to her work. She basically said it's because she's so capable and busy with her career that she lacks those domestic skills.
That's quite a statement, framing it almost as a consequence of her professional success.
Exactly. And that whole work thing for her, it wasn't just a side note. It seems like it has real implications for relationships. She mentioned her busy schedule means she often forgets to reply to messages.
Okay, I can see how that could cause problems.
Right. She said it's led to misunderstandings before, that people have thought she was being
Which means?
Arrogant, or maybe aloof, stuck up. And she explicitly said right there on the show that she needs a partner who either gets this about her communication style or is willing to follow up if they don't hear back.
Wow, that's laying it all out there. That's a big potential hurdle she's flagging right away.
It really is a clear need she has.
So let's shift to their relationship histories. Because you mentioned there was a contrast, and that often shapes what people are looking for next, right?
Absolutely. So he mentioned 2 previous relationships. The longest was just 5 months back in college. He said it ended because they were both just too busy studying.
Okay.
The shortest was even shorter, 3 months. That was with a coworker. And it ended when he transferred jobs around the COVID period. And the key thing he said was that he described both of these as, well...
So shorter, perhaps less intense experiences. What about Hoai Anh?
Her story was quite different, more varied. She talked about having crushes, using the term karuna on 1 or 2 people at a time. But she also shared this really specific, impactful high school story. She actually asked a boy if he liked her.
Oh, wow. Gutsy.
Yeah. And his response was, liked you a long time ago. And she said that response, that specific moment, was what made her decide right then to study abroad.
Whoa. That's a major life decision triggered by that interaction.
Isn't it? And then, after that formative experience, she had one significant relationship. It was 3 years long while she was in Japan with a Vietnamese guy living there too.
3 years is substantial. How did that end?
She said it ended due to 2 big issues. First, family issues. And second, she said, possibly personality issues. Her words were something like, maybe due to both. She was also quite clear that she didn't want to badmouth her ex.
So you've got his relatively short, maybe circumstantial relationships versus her history, which includes this really pivotal rejection that wasn't quite a rejection leading to a life change, and then a long-term serious relationship ending for complex, possibly painful reasons.
Exactly. That contrast is pretty stark. His seem less emotionally heavy, maybe, while hers feels like it carries more weight, more complexity.
Definitely. So how might these different pasts shape what they're looking for now?
Well, you'd guess that Hoai Anh's experiences, especially that longer relationship ending, might make her more cautious or maybe prioritize certain things very highly.
Which brings us to their criteria for a partner. What were they actually looking for?
Right, so he was quite clear. Appearance isn't important. Not at all. He said he focuses on inner beauty in the heart, in the soul.
Okay. Noble sentiment.
Yeah, he wants someone easygoing, caring. And then he had this slightly odd initial requirement. He said, maybe jokingly, just needs to be a boy.
Wait, what?
But then he quickly added a clarification, saying he needs to be sure they're a true man.
True man. What do you make of that? A joke gone weird or something else?
It's interesting, isn't it? The just needs to be a boy part sounds like maybe nervous humor, trying to be broad.
Yeah.
But adding true man suggests he's looking for something specific, maybe maturity, reliability, someone ready for commitment, not just superficial stuff.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And what about the distance? He's in HCMC, she's in Hanoi.
He tackled that head on. He said he's not afraid of Hanoi, and basically he'd go anywhere as long as she was the one. That's a pretty big commitment he's signaling there.
That is a strong statement. So that's a general focus on inner qualities, willing to overcome distance. What about Hoai Anh? Did she have a list?
Oh, she had more specifics. Even though she said she believes in love at first sight, she definitely had criteria.
What?
Okay, first, height. Needs a boyfriend taller than 1.68 meters. And she actually pointed out that Uck was, quote, a bit weak on this point.
Ouch. Did she say if it was a deal breaker?
She added that maybe it could be negotiable. So not a hard no, but definitely noted.
Okay, what else?
She wants someone with a stable job or maybe in business. Someone who knows how to cook, remember, she doesn't.
Right, that connects back.
And importantly, someone who can build a family with her. And then, echoing her earlier point, she reiterated needing someone who really understands and tolerates her demanding work habits.
So quite a detailed picture. And already you see some potential friction points, right? The height thing specifically.
Definitely. You've got his very general inner beauty focus versus her much more specific checklist, including a physical trait he doesn't meet. But, the most revealing thing she shared, her deepest need, seemed to connect right back to her past.
Ah, yes, the marriage and family views. That felt like a really significant moment in the transcript.
It really was. She shared that her parents divorced when she was young. And because of that, she's become, in her own words, obsessed with the fear of a broken marriage.
Obsessed. That's a strong word.
Very. She expressed this deep fear that she might not be able to give her own future children a happy, stable family. And because of this profound anxiety, she's specifically looking for a partner who is incredibly tolerant.
Tolerant in what way?
The Vietnamese word she used was bao dung. It means more than just tolerant. It implies immense generosity, forgiveness, patience. She said she needs someone who can truly endure her, essentially, to ensure the family unit stays strong and happy.
Wow. That completely reframes her need for understanding and tolerance, doesn't it? It's not just about accommodating a busy schedule.
Not at all. It elevates it. Sounds like it stems from this core childhood wound, making it maybe her most critical requirement, even more than height or cooking skills or anything else.
Absolutely. It gives all her criteria a totally different weight. So that's the heavy stuff. Did they talk about practical day-to-day things too, like housework?
They did, and Uck actually responded directly to her point about not knowing how to cook or do housework. He just flat out said he'd be willing to do all of it if she didn't want to or couldn't.
That's a big offer. How did she react to that?
Her response was quite telling, I thought. She basically said, well, actions speak louder than words, and time will tell if he really means it.
Not immediately won over by the promise. Wants proof.
Seems like it. She wants to see the follow-through. And then there was finances. This was another interesting point.
What did she say about money?
She had a very clear preference, almost leaning traditional here. She stated she wants her husband to manage the family finances.
Really? Even though she's financially independent herself?
Her reasoning was that she has no experience with it, finds dealing with money stressful, and she said something like, the person holding the money has the headache.
Huh. Okay, so delegate the headache. Interesting. So she's independent in her career, earns her own money, but prefers a more traditional setup for managing household finances.
Exactly. It just shows that being an independent woman doesn't automatically mean wanting to take on every single role or responsibility, especially ones traditionally seen as male.
Good point. Okay, what about navigating disagreements? Conflict resolution, jealousy. Did those come up?
They did. Eck talked about his approach to arguments. He said he tends to be silent. Im lung was the term.
Just shuts down.
Maybe, or perhaps just waits for things to cool off. He also said he'd be the one to admit fault first. He emphasized that happiness, in his view, comes from yielding no, not from winning the argument.
So a non-confrontational, yield-first approach. What about Hoai Anh?
She described herself as a bit hot-tempered. Her ideal way to handle it was mutual yielding. She hoped that when she gets heated, he would yield, and when he gets heated, she would yield. The goal being a peaceful family life.
It's sort of reciprocal de-escalation strategy.
Pretty much. And then they touched on jealousy. This was another moment where Hoai Anh was very direct.
How so?
She described herself as being a bit like Hon Tu.
I need context for that one.
Hon Tu is a very famous character from Vietnamese literature, specifically the Tale of Q. She's known for her extreme jealousy and, frankly, her quite vengeful actions against her husband's mistress.
Oh. So calling herself Hon Tu is not subtle.
Not subtle at all. It's a strong signal that she can be intensely jealous and absolutely will not tolerate any infidelity or perceived disloyalty. It's a clear warning shot.
Wow. How did Oak respond to that? A heavy thing to drop in a first meeting.
He responded quite simply, actually. He just stated that when he loves someone, he loves only one person.
So he met her intense warning with a simple statement of fidelity and commitment.
Exactly, a direct reassurance. So they've shared all this stuff, backgrounds, personalities, needs, fears, potential friction points like distance and height. How did the actual face-to-face interaction go when they finally met properly?
Right, the actual meeting. Well, Oak seemed quite smitten initially. He said he was very happy to meet her, found her very beautiful and cute. He even said something poetic, he'd remember her name in his heart.
So positive vibes from him and her.
She also had positive first impressions of his looks. She found him very handsome, good-looking, but, and this seems important, she immediately added that she wanted more time to really understand his personality.
So acknowledging the attraction, but holding back a bit on the deeper connection. Wants more data.
Seems like it. And then came that pivotal moment you often see on these shows.
The eye contact thing.
Yep. The MC told them to look into each other's eyes for 30 seconds, really emphasizing how crucial this moment is for feeling something beyond just the conversation.
Right, trying to force that spark, maybe?
Or at least reveal something. After that intense gaze, they were told, okay, press the button if you feel a connection, if you want to try dating.
The moment of truth.
Exactly. And despite Ig's enthusiasm, his willingness to move, to do housework, his positive comments about her.
Let me guess. Only he pressed the button.
You got it. Only Dick pressed. Hoai Anh did not.
Wow. So that's the big question then, isn't it? Why not? She said he was handsome, cute, he seemed willing to meet her needs. What was the reason she gave?
Well, she explained her thinking. She reiterated, he was very cute. I liked him. She did mention the distance again, saying, Banmuonhenho, he's a bit far away.
So distance was a factor?
It was the factor she mentioned, yes. But was it the main reason?
Doesn't sound like it, based on how you're setting it up.
No. And this is where that specific detail from the transcript becomes so crucial. Her primary reason, the thing that ultimately made her hold back, came directly from that 30-second eye contact exercise.
Really? What did she perceive?
She said she felt that when he looked at her during that time, his eyes, they didn't have certainty. The phrase was, "Konko sak tan."
No certainty. So she read something in his gaze. Hesitation, shyness, lack of conviction.
Something like that. She perceived a lack of certainty or conviction in his eyes. And that feeling, that nonverbal cue she picked up, apparently outweighed all the positive things said, all the potential compatibility points.
That is absolutely fascinating. So despite all the talk, the lists, the promises, the shared vulnerabilities, the final decision hinged on this really subtle, perceived nonverbal signal in a very specific, maybe even artificial moment.
It really highlights how powerful that unspoken communication can be, doesn't it? Even when we're trying to be logical and weigh pros and cons based on conversation.
Absolutely. It wasn't the height difference or who does the cooking or even the miles between Hanoi and HTMC that was the ultimate decider in that instant. It was the perceived lack of solidity in his gaze.
So after the non-match, what happened?
Well, they agreed to be friends, exchanged numbers off stage, the usual polite closing for these situations. And the hosts then plugged their other service, Jepo Tuk, which is like a speed dating service, maybe suggesting a less pressured, more private way to find someone.
Right. So, okay, let's wrap this up. What are the big takeaways from this deep dive into just this one interaction?
Well, I mean, we definitely saw how past experiences, especially something significant like her parents' divorce, can shape really fundamental, almost non-negotiable needs in a partner, that deep need for baodong, for tolerance.
Yeah, that was powerful.
Yeah.
And we saw the contrast between stated criteria too, right? Like
Yeah.
the height thing, or her wanting a traditional money manager despite her own independence.
Exactly, and the different ways they approach conflict, his silence in yielding versus her hope for mutual yielding, plus that very direct warning about jealousy using the Huntu reference.
But I think the most striking thing, for me anyway, was seeing such a clear example of how that subtle, nonverbal cue, just a look in the eyes, could seemingly override everything else in that final decision moment.
Totally agree. It just trumped all the stated intentions, the practical considerations, even the initial positive feelings she admitted having.
It really makes you think about how much of connection, or the lack of it, happens sort of beneath the surface of the words.
It certainly does. Which leads to, well, a provocative thought, doesn't it?
Go on.
Well, in a world where we spend so much time crafting dating profiles, listing our criteria, having these explicit conversations about what we want, how much do our subconscious reactions, our gut feelings, those fleeting nonverbal signals, and maybe a perceived hesitant gaze, truly dictate whether we feel that click, that connection, maybe even more than all the things we consciously list and discuss?
Something to definitely chew on as you navigate your own connections out there.
Indeed.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.